And Matt, I'm going to hop over to you because you have something. Bitcoin already has kind of these pseudonymous properties, but you actually don't think that that goes far enough to protect people's privacy when they're using it.
So I became involved with Bitcoin maybe 3 years ago now. It was kind of amazing to us as academics in the field of cryptography. You know, we had been trying for years, our community, to build something like this, and nobody had succeeded. And then this anonymous person comes along and builds Bitcoin, and it works. And it's amazing to us, and we're just staggered by the fact that this does work. But there's one place that we kind of figure it doesn't work. There was one corner that Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he is, cut when he built the system, and that was the privacy aspect. Ultimately, what Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger of who gave what money to which other person. This information is shared by everybody. There's no concept of a trusted bank. It's not even a question of, for example, you know, do I care that the bank or law enforcement can capture my records? It's, can my neighbors see what I'm spending? Can my friends see the money I'm spending? Now, Bitcoin does have this pseudonymous property where you can essentially say, well, I'm just a number. Nobody should be able to trace me, but that doesn't work very well. And the one last thing I'll say here is that even for Satoshi Nakamoto, he's now, or she, is now the victim of his own success, because he's worth maybe several $100 million, which if he wants to stay anonymous, he can't touch. So now there's this problem. You know, how do we fix this? How do we make the currency a little bit more private? So we came up with a system that uses more advanced cryptography to essentially take the Bitcoin ledger and add very, very strong untraceability to the currency. It's called ZeroCoin. We actually have a first paper that came out last year in a security conference, another one that's coming out this year. It really is Bitcoin, just minus the fact that you can tell who's spending what, and you can't tell who they're spending it or how much they're spending. Which brings us, leads us.
There's nobody that would know that. Even people running ZeroCoin couldn't see that part of it.
Exactly. If I pay you money, the only people who know anything at the end of that transaction are myself and you. That leads us to a problem, which is that, you know, we think this is a very important technology. We think it's a good thing. It can be built. It should be built. But then again, what are the consequences of building this? And I'm talking about consequences here, not just for the world, but also for me. I'm a little bit afraid at any moment somebody's going to come kick down my door when we release this software. I don't know what the law is here. I don't know if this is, you know, something that's going to facilitate crime or if it's going to facilitate privacy. I guess, you know, what we've learned this year is that maybe we don't have as much privacy as we thought we did, and this is my way of doing something to repair that.
This is a question about Bitcoin, right? I mean, you're developing ZeroCoin because Bitcoin is very transparent and traceable in many ways. I mean, is Bitcoin actually a good tool for the dark web? I mean, some people have speculated that, you know, who knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. If you look at the first letters of his two names, you get NSA.
I've heard that rumor a few times. So the answer to that, a good way to look at the answer to that is there is a gentleman who is currently in jail right now up in New York, and you all know who he is. He's the Dread Pirate Roberts, or allegedly he is, Ross Ulbricht, I think is his name. He is currently in this weird position where he has had 29,000 Bitcoin seized. He is asking for them back, and simultaneously he's saying that he didn't do anything illegal. He wasn't involved in Silk Road. So now
there's an early adopter.
Exactly. He's one of the first people mining. Now the question is, if we were to look at the history of those Bitcoins, where do they come from? Do they come from Silk Road, or do they come from some early adopting, you know, mining pool? Well, right now, I think what I've seen so far is the answer is they all seem to come from Silk Road. Now, where did they come from before that? Were they just passed through Silk Road in some innocent way? But unfortunately, you know, here we have a case where, looking at the history of Bitcoin, even a person who had a lot to gain from not having his money tied to Silk Road doesn't seem to have necessarily done that very well if he is guilty. So it seems like, yes, it may be possible to use Bitcoin anonymously and safely if you're a criminal, but it's not that easy. And if you're using moving a large chunk of money, this is going to be a problem for you. Now, the other question, though, is what if you're somebody who's not a criminal? What if you're an activist? What if you are somebody who's donating money to a cause that you don't want to be associated with? I found myself donating some Bitcoin to WikiLeaks this summer, which maybe among some circles is actually not a very good thing to do, but I felt like it was an okay thing at the time. Then I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, I've just linked myself forever to WikiLeaks. What if I want to get a security clearance someday? There is a reason that we want to have some protection.
That 0 point
Yeah, well, now that's
Exactly, you already shot that one.
they're lost. But you know, anyway, I'm not even sure what the question is, but I do have some, I want to go back to one thing. Is there really a website called porn.com, and do they accept bitcoins?
I don't know if it's porn.com, but I know there's one. It might be Pornhub or something. Okay. Not that I would know.
You notice how no one else answered that question.
This is Neil from Brookings and UCLA. This is a question for Matt. Is the computational burden of Zerocoin something that you anticipate would be an impediment to adoption or not?
So it's pretty fast. The new version that we have is a little bit slower than Bitcoin itself. So it's, you know, Bitcoin's already having trouble scaling up to kind of Visa loads. So it might cause a problem there, but it's not that much slower. Yeah.
Okay, Carter Doherty with Bloomberg. This points to a need for a lesson in basic cryptography, which is something I've started in on and we spoke about on the phone. One of the things that was very revealing to me about my initial learning about cryptography was that when you come up with a new kind of protocol for encrypting something, you don't actually start using it right away. You sort of throw it out there and let other people smack it down and fiddle with it and see if they can break it, sort of like testing out a new lock. How great is the certitude among professional cryptographers that the Bitcoin protocol, and perhaps even your own Zerocoin protocol, have been sufficiently smacked around that we can have a high degree of confidence in them? This is something that I think it's safe to say I've never gotten an explanation in English. I've gotten an explanation.
So the easiest way to answer that question is what you do is you come up with a new protocol. You take it, you put it out there, you get a bunch of crazy people to invest their own money in it until each Bitcoin is worth, you know, $1,000 or something insane like that. And then you see if the protocol breaks. And nobody has ever done that in the history of cryptography until this last several years. And so if you'd asked me 4 or 5 years ago, would Bitcoin work? I would have laughed and I would have said, it's going to be totally broken. But it hasn't. It's been put to probably the biggest pen test that any security system has ever been put through in history, because there's so much money at stake. If there's anything broken, you will benefit hugely from breaking it. And so I think right now the verdict is that this is a solution that works very well. It's not the way I would choose to deploy every security system, but this just happens to be a good way to do it.
And they do find breaks, right? And
they do occasionally, this or that. Yeah, and there's this new thing
evolved.
about selfish mining possibly being a problem. But these are kind of, nobody's broken it in a very fundamental way yet.
We had a question in the very back.
Hi, my name's Joe Peck. I'm a lawyer and a Bitcoin enthusiast. I've been paying attention a little bit to some of the stuff that the chief scientist, Gavin Andreessen, is doing with the next, I guess it would be the next version of the Bitcoin protocol, or the next updated version. And I've heard some stories saying that they might scrap the Bitcoin addresses, or the public key addresses, to give an opportunity for it to be a little bit more voluntarily not anonymous per se. And you're talking about Zerocoin. I just wonder if it had an interesting possibility for this sort of bifurcation of the way you look at anonymous coins versus more voluntary transactions that are less anonymous, and what you guys might think about a situation where there was those two worlds.
You know, I think that you should go all the way. I know that the Bitcoin people have been trying to, I'll answer this very quickly, trying to come up with patches to make Bitcoin more private. But the Bitcoin Foundation has a lot of other incentives too. They're trying to be friendly to regulators. They're trying to do, you know, so they're not doing everything they could to make the protocol private. And I think that the motivations there are not entirely technical. I don't believe in these kind of half measures. I think we should go all the way, but it's definitely an improvement.
Here.
Hi, Wanjanu. I'm curious to hear the panel's view on whether the continued use of Bitcoins for illicit purposes and perhaps an unforeseen technical vulnerability in Bitcoins could potentially threaten the widespread adoption of Bitcoins and perhaps the, I guess, future success of Bitcoins.
Bitcoin going to continue to be the currency of the dark side, the dark web?
But there's no question you have some legitimate players who worry about the risk, the reputational risk of dealing in Bitcoins. There's no question that that is a hampering aspect. That doesn't impact all people, but it certainly does impact the broad acceptance.
I'll say I don't know about Bitcoin, but I'll certainly acknowledge that some digital currency will continue to pose problems.
Zero coin.
It'll be something. No, to the technical question, I think that Bitcoin really, there could be a disaster, but some technology like Bitcoin will continue to exist, and it will continue to grow. I think this is the future.
My only comment on that is that while regulatory clarity is at this point constructive and, in my view, needed, the industry doesn't necessarily have to wait. And leadership in this space from industry is essential. So conferences like these that begin to band together those that want to protect the reputation and the credibility of the market in an emerging product like this, these are essential events, because if it's not as if the practices that the policymakers are looking for are secret. It's the Bank Secrecy Act. It's implementation of financial sanctions. This is something you could hire, we hire you back in your old job and get you to come in and advise on this. But the industry, to the extent that it waits on this, is not taking the opportunity to define the space from a regulatory perspective in a way that makes lawmakers comfortable. And that's always a gamble, right? And you can see this debate in the banking space right now when it comes to issues, whether it's the BSA or IEPA or prudential oversight. You can wait on the back foot and let others try to figure it out, but then you get what you get. Or you can take a more proactive approach, as several in this room and in the industry are doing, which is to engage the lawmakers and the regulators and say, this is educating you about the constructive functionality of the product and some of the safeguards that we think can work. That's the right approach to take, and obviously we're seeing it. So,
Thank you, guys. I hope we shed some sunlight on the dark web.